This conference will now be recorded.
There he is. Good evening, sir.
Oh, good evening, everyone.
We'll go ahead and get started. If folks can mute their phones if you're not talking, please. So this is the April 27th Board of Selectmen meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order concerning imposition on strict limitations of the number of people that may gather in one place. Meetings in the town of Upton are being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. So with that, we have the public comment this evening. The MURSD School Committee is here to walk us through their budgeting process. And then we have some board discussion items around Memorial Day, some liquor license changes, some building committee changes, scholarships, a victualler's license for Kelly Farm, and some administrative applications and a mosquito flyer, and then town manager updates. So with that, I will open the floor up to any public comment.
Let's see.
Hearing none, I will hand it over. Mr. DeZutter, to you, please.
Brett, thank you.
Yeah, welcome and thank you for coming.
No, appreciate the opportunity. I know after the last meeting, there seemed to be some questions about the process and how things were done or how things are done. So I know Dr. Maruschek, myself are here. Hold on one second. Accessibility features. So, and just wanted to see, spend a little bit of time, walk you through and allow you to ask some questions around the process, allow you to dive deep into the budget. If you have other questions, because I know there seem to be some questions around that from a general sense. I don't know if I have the ability to share my screen.
You should now, Phil. I gave you the ability. So you should have the screen should be at the bottom where you can hit it and share it.
Hold on one.
The best is down at the bottom where it's like mic, camera, and then screen and leave. If you hit that at the bottom, you should be able to share it.
Okay. No, I think I have to. Hold on, I'll be right back.
No problem.
Yes, I can share, but lovely Apple privacy policy. Now that should do it. Can you, Kelly, give me that authorization again?
I gave it to the new one that you just signed on. Because you're on
Okay.
here twice.
Doesn't want to let me do it.
If you want to email them to me, I can share my screen and present them for you.
Give me 1 second. It won't.
I think we're going to go for three Phil DeZutters.
Oh, this is going to be a good meeting.
Love it. More the better.
Kelly, can you try that again? And then if that doesn't work, I'll send you a link and you can put it out there.
Yes. Okay, you should have it now.
Okay. So. Okay.
We got
Ellie,
it.
I think you can see it. Okay, now we'll go to this. Since we're Zoom users, we'll go to here. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time and kind of just walk you through kind of some of the general overview and the key pieces. I think it was understood. I mean, I've been on the committee now 10 years, and I know in the beginning when I got on, it was understood that there was a lot of confusion, I think, in both town boards, not just the FinCom and Selectmen, but also Mendon's FinCom and Selectmen, that, you know, really the understanding of the school budget and the intricacies of it and state financing and all of that. You know, we've worked hard over the last 10 years to make sure that we have an open and transparent process. And in fact, you know, there are participants from each town that are on the budget subcommittee, that are on the negotiation committee and invited to those. And then also too, over time, we've had the multi-board meetings in place that we put in place to basically first starting to educate the towns and around these processes and discussion topics. Because I think many people didn't understand some of the nuances were there. And then also the dynamics that influence this has been, you know, have increased in complexity over the last 20 plus years, you know, as we've looked at the new funding formula that came into play in the state back in the mid 90s. Okay. So just an overview of kind of timing. The process for us starts in December. And usually that process really starts kind of, I'll say November into December, with the schools and the departments gathering up together their detailed budgets. And then I know Dr. Maruztek and Jay and others go through those for the month of December. And then we normally get some indication of the direction we're headed and the
Phil?
request basically in early January.
Phil, I really apologize. Your screen is just showing a white screen. Are we supposed to be looking at something?
You cannot see it, huh? Did you see the last slide?
We did.
Okay, let's try this. Did you see the last slide again?
No, I can't.
Phil, I think the only thing that we saw was before you put it maybe into presentation mode and you just had the file open, we saw that.
Can you
Looked
see
like
it now?
a cover sheet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's visible.
Now we can see that.
All right, well then let's go. We'll do it the old school way. So just to go back to what I was saying from a standpoint of the process, you know, the process starts in December, late November, early December, with the details being gathered of each individual school's budget and the department budgets. And I can share this presentation with you so you have it after we're done. And then really, you know, we work that budget through January and into February, and normally we share initial budgets with the FinComs of each town and select boards mid to the end of February. It's normally when we come. We normally get a date. This year, we were in the last week of February that we get to share it with each FinCom, and then it's, you know, the select boards are brought into that. We certify our budget normally by the middle of March. That's the timing that's there. And a little nuance that I think is important to understand is that from that date that we certify that budget, the budget can go down, but it can't go up. So we don't have the ability, if we all of a sudden have a cost come in during this process, of increasing our budget above that area. So we have to look at this budget in kind of the most kind of conservative way and making sure that we're managing the costs, because at these points in time, you know, sometimes we don't know, you know, we don't know exactly state funding, we don't know exactly insurance costs all the time. You know, we could be in negotiations for contracts and things like that, like we are this year, things like that. And state revenue numbers, I think, are important to be known, that they're directionally known along the process, but they're not finalized normally until midsummer. And then actually last year was a bit of a nuance, and you experienced it as well with, I think, the Chapter 90 and some of the other state funding that you had, where everything was kind of put a hold before the middle of summer with COVID, and you didn't really get locked into final numbers until, I think this year, and keep me honest, Joe, but I believe it was sometime around early December, mid-November that we actually got finalization. So that's It's like 6 months later than we normally do. And then also town contributions are finalized at town meeting or after funding votes, meaning if it's an override vote or things like that, that's when the town contributions are finalized. And, like I said, we can only request funds for the operational budget in this process once in the year. Like we can't go back if we all of a sudden have a new cost or we're in the middle of negotiations. We can't go back and basically ask for additional funding from the towns. Like I said before, the budget can go down, but not up. So, when you look at some of these dates, and I just put some of these out there, I know Joe worked through these when we presented the budget back in March, but we have our open budget hearing mid-March. Mid-April, the House budget is released. We do already have the governor budget, but then the House makes adjustments. We have our town meetings and elections in early May, but it isn't until mid-May that the Senate budget's released. And then it's around the beginning of July that the state budget is normally finalized. I think it's just important to know that, and I think, you deal with this in the town too, you're working your budgets and working your pieces, around these different pieces and trying to make sure you've got the best estimate, you've got the best projections, you're kind of adjusting the number, you're trying to limit the impact to the towns and the taxpayers as much as possible and making sure the things are there. So just kind of the nuances of the timeline. When you look at the drivers of the budget, the two big kind of core components are, one is, we do take a look at strategic investments, and that's driven by our 5-year plan that's been put in place and worked through. So that's there. And, it's really about how do we improve student performance? How do we support the students in the right way? What are the nuances and the pieces that are there? I think, when you look at this year's request and what's in there, the incremental positions are really all around, supporting the students after the pandemic and, trying to improve upon the learning loss and make up for that, that's occurred. And also the social emotional learning part, which has been a big part of our strategy, and putting those pieces in there so that our students who are kind of being hit by many different dynamics this year can be supported in the right way. The other part of that too is that we have key yearly increases in other budget drivers such as insurance and benefits, as we've talked about before, the health insurance, the Worcester Retirement Fund, and so forth. Special education, English language learning increases, transportation, and and overall, a big part of our budget is personnel costs. So contracts and pieces like that. So last year, for example, we had reached an agreement, tentative 1-year MOA with the teachers to basically do a 0.5% increase at the beginning of the year and a 1% increase at the end of the year. And as you all know, we're in the middle of negotiations with the teachers for the follow-on contract because we did that last year really to give ourselves breathing room to figure out what this pandemic was going to look like. But I think it should be understood too that many of these costs we have no control over. And, I think it's interesting to know, if we have some new children that move into town that have special, needs and we have to support those, or we have to use an outside, either a collaborative school or a specialized school to support these needs, we end up having to foot that bill and fund that bill. And, we can't say no to that. And so we have those kinds of mandates. We have mandates around ELL, when we have a student show up on our doorstep and they might not know any English, but we have to educate them, we have to bear that cost of doing it. Same with transportation and personnel costs. We also don't have some of the nuances that I'll call it a single town system will have versus a regional system. In addition, you take like transportation, one of the benefits was the state was supposed to fund our transportation if we became a regional school, but the reality is they don't ever fund it all. They normally funded it anywhere from 60 to 80%. So we're still left with a cost there. All right. And also too, I think it should be noted in contract years, personnel negotiations normally run in parallel to the budgeting process due to timing. The reality is the process, whether it be with the teachers, the janitors, or so forth, these groups, take time to work through. And, and they're trying to sort themselves through, and it takes them time as well. So that's just kind of been the process and the timing of the way it works. From the standpoint of the drivers of the town cost, really the first component is the state deals with this thing called minimum local contribution. We've talked about it. I can dive deeper if you really want to into how it's constructed across, property value, personal income, the municipal revenue growth factor. But I think it's understood that, that first that component is put forth to the towns, and then the remainder is split based on the student population. So right now, I believe that 55%, essentially 55% of our students in the MURSD in the district as a whole come from Upton, and 45% come from Mendon. So the remainder amounts get split in that way. But I think it's important to know that, at least as it relates to the MLC and the minimum local contribution there, the state has been increase, our funding, or their increases to funding are regulated based on these adjustments. So they have a calculation they use. We've talked about, like, there's a percentage. Are we at target? Are we not? In the past years, we haven't been at target. We finally worked our way up to that target. And, but that MLC, just to be clear, adjusts over time as property values and personal income go up and down. So that piece that's there. A lack of funding to the levy doesn't lower these MLC requirements either. What the state feels is, if the town has the ability and the affluence to afford to pay for the school, what it does with its levy is not the state's business, because the state feels that you should be paying this. So an example of this, if you look from FY17 to FY21, the state funding to the district has increased by $285,000, but the state has increased the minimum local contribution by $2.29 million to the town, meaning that's the additional piece they're thinking the town needs to be paying. Okay. So, those are a lot of different dynamics that are there. I think it's important to understand, and I do want to give us some time to go through any other of the budget questions or other questions you may have. But, town participants are there on the MURSD, on the budget and the negotiation subcommittee. We have had these multi-board meetings across all boards. We had one, it kind of turned into one, which was originally the FinCom meeting at the end of February. We do record, and our meetings are open to everybody. And, we've had active attendance of select board and FinCom meetings during the January to March timeframe. We make it a point for either myself or Vicky or other people to join in to the different town meetings so that we can answer questions, but we can also be aware of what's going on as it relates to the town as a whole, not just the school. So we understand some of the different dynamics that are being talked about and make sure that we're aware of that and working through those pieces. We have the materials on the website for the school as well, from not only the current process, but the past processes. We've put it out there in a way of making sure that people have access to it and can understand it. They can read the presentations that, we've given at the open budget hearing and through the course of time, so that people can understand them. And then we also have video overviews. I think this is an important piece. Last year, as the pandemic was hitting, we had actually done a number of overviews of kind of detailed budgeting dynamics of each one of the schools, but also each one of the departments. And you can find those, on our YouTube channel out there, and those are there. So, and then we've also put some past primers together to explore more deeply, these different subjects and the influencing pieces out there, such as SPED or transportation, athletics, and so forth. The goal there, and we realize, is that, school funding and school budgeting is a very complex thing, and we're not expecting the general public to become experts, but we do provide the access, and we're always willing to sit down and answer questions that people may have. So that becomes an important thing to us. Okay. From a town control perspective, I think it's important to know, that the town, while yes, you don't necessarily control the budget of the school, you do determine the funding mechanisms for the school budget. We just say in the end and set the budget to being, this is what the cost is. In terms of funding, whether it's an override or another matter, or other manner, that's the decisions you guys are working through. In terms of, if you've disagreed with the funding, but the other town has agreed, we normally take one of two paths. One is we adjust budgets to new funding levels based on town requirements. We've always had an open conversation about this, because I think it's an important thing there to understand what can be done. But then also too, if we can't really get resolution between the two towns, we actually have the ability to, within the charter, we've never done this, but we could have a joint town meeting to determine, that the funding to the schools is important and something that both towns feel is critical to be done. So that's the other part that's there. So I just wanted to throw some of those pieces out there. I figure I'll take a minute there and I'll stop this so we can see each other, but really just answer questions.
Great. I think it's always good for folks, including the board, to get a refresher on that process, the timing and the sequencing. I think that just helps. And as with all of the selectmen meetings and other public meetings, right? They're all sort of, particularly now, they're all recorded, they're all available. There are minutes for all these meetings. So, I equate it to, just because people aren't engaged in a process doesn't mean that it's not a transparent process, right? Just because you're not looking at it doesn't mean it's not transparent if you would like to do that. And that applies for us as well. So I think that it's great to see, the details. It's great to understand all of the work that the school committee members do. Clearly there is a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of time, effort, and work that's put in. I think part of our struggle as a board this year was the degree to which the override or the degree to which the budget increased relative to what we were talking about last year. I think we could have all reasonably anticipated that the budget was going to increase based on the fact that, it was planned to do so last year, and that was really deferred by a year. I think some additional conversation around that would have been useful, because I'm sure that, as early as, December, November, when we start asking the questions, though you don't have firm answers, you obviously have a directional sense from your 5-year plan around what your thought is for the year. And I think that's the partnership, and that's the conversation that we hope to be able to have going forward, is a much more an earlier conversation about what the plans are for the budget. I think that will be useful for the board's consideration, as well as FinCom, as we think strategically about what types of investments we need to make in the town. We're not just investing in our schools, we're investing in other services for the entire population. And obviously we want to do that in the most effective way possible. And part of that is through alignment and coordination and collaboration of all these major expenses across the town's budget. And I think of particular note this year, the increases we've seen for other towns. So first I would say, I saw a US News school ranking that just came out over the past couple of days, and Upton is, and I think is doing better and better over the past several years. And this year the same was true. So it was very nice and reassuring to see that. So I think there's a lot of value there. Our schools are excellent and have a very good reputation. So, those are all very good things as well. One thing we did see, we spoke with other towns to get a sense of context on where we were. And obviously every town is different and unique, but we talked to 7 or 8 other towns, and their increases ranged anywhere from, it looks like an average of, we have 1.5% to 2.5, 2.3, 2.8, and there's a 7.2 and a 6.8%. And then Upton was looking for a 14% increase. So the process is one thing, and I think at some point it's also the dollars and cents. So the question partly is, at what point in the process does it become clear to you as a school committee that you're going to have an increase that is so significantly variant from other communities and towns and what have you?
Yeah, I think it's a question of what communities and towns you look at, because the MLC can have a real exponential effect on a town's funding area. And so when you look at a town that doesn't maybe move in an MLC, like we have because of our affluence level, you'll find that, they won't need the kind of increase because the state is basically funding a good portion of that. And so, our 6.6% increase, which is what it is, then in turn translates into a much, larger impact to the town of Upton. And there are different factors that weigh in on that in terms of, how the MLC fits into the big part of it, how the percentage of student increase, fits into that as well. So I think in terms of timing to what you said, I would agree. I think, our timing is normally, we have a good sense of really where we're at in comparison to other places by the end of January. That's, when we've always had it. This was always been there. I think, where we probably made a mistake was making sure that people were clear that last year was kind of kicked down the road. I thought that was understood because we talked pretty openly about it in a number of our meetings last year as we adjusted the budget down. We really knew that, as this year happened and we were in a kind of a different dynamic, that we were really just pushing these costs off until the following year. So, but we, I would agree. I mean, I think we could have, done a better job in that communication. I have no problem with that. But in terms of the overall piece and what's there, I think it's a question of looking at the drivers that are there. It's sometimes hard to compare one school's budget to another, because here's what I would say. You take the U.S. News and World Report. According to that report, we're probably one of the top, we're in the top 20% in the state.
Yeah.
But our per pupil costs are literally usually in about the bottom either half or the bottom third. And I think you can go back to the state sites. You can look at the comparisons. We're underneath the state average across the board on these things. So I'm not talking about it. Now, I will say, there are some components, that are challenging at times. Special ed costs where we have no control. And some of the other areas, and whether it's transportation and some of the other components that are there. In addition to that, I think the board members feel pretty strongly about the investments that are being made and trying to put the supports in place as our students come back from this pandemic so they can be supported effectively. But I'm not adverse to having the debate about those things and having those comments. I mean, we're hearing pretty loud and clear from our constituencies, which granted is predominantly parents of students, that these things are important. And I do agree with you. You have to mix it within the town and the components that are there, because there are other, I'll call it, there are other population groups that are there. The town isn't about just the school.
Yeah, no, that's great and helpful. I appreciate it. Steve, Maureen, I would open it up for any questions, comments that either of you have.
I do have some questions. And I know when we do the budget process, that we only look at the budget side. We never look at the expenditure side. And I had requested from Jay 2020 expense report and the 2021 expense report through March 21st. And in the report, the teacher salaries, both for 2020 were $1 million underfunded. And by March 21st, the teacher salaries were underfunded by $1.012 million. And I don't understand why, because salaries should be the easiest thing to figure out because of all their steps and grades and lanes. I don't know, how are you going to fund that $1 million? And maybe this is a question for Superintendent Marusek.
Jay, I mean, Jay can answer it. I'll give you the short answer, which is the funding that you're looking at is offset as well by other funding methods that are there, such as choice and others that get applied towards that line item.
Well, I had looked at the choice line items also, and we didn't get very much from choice. It's just, we were underfunded by $1 million last year in 2020, and we're underfunded by $1,012,000 just in the teacher salaries, and then there's like a $85,000 underfund in the subs. And I don't know how we're gonna make that up, looking at the rest of the expenditures.
Let me address the school
Okay.
choice piece first. Hi, everybody. This is Jay. School choice, we appropriate a certain amount of school choice money that we apply to those 4 teacher salary lines that you're referring to. And we do a journal adjustment to transfer those expenses to the school choice revolving account, but that adjustment is done at the end of the fiscal year. So during the course of the year, that budget year-to-date report is always going to show those accounts in deficit until I do that journal adjustment. Once I do it, then it goes away and it transfers the expenses to choice. The reason we do it that way is partially because that's the way the Department of Ed tells us to do it, and the Department of Revenue. But the other reason is that sometimes at the end of the year, maybe we had budgeted $300,000 for snow removal and we only used $100,000. So I've got $200,000 there that I can use as a surplus in that line, so I don't have to use all of the choice, because if I can carry the choice money over, not me. If the district can carry the choice money over in the revolving account from year to year, it gives us more flexibility, especially when we really only can count on about a $600,000 or $700,000 revenue increase from year to year, which sometimes doesn't even cover the health insurance piece. So that's why those accounts are there. The sub accounts you're referring to, we try to budget based on what we think subs are going to cost for the year. Sometimes we have a maternity leave we didn't hear about. This year we've had a ton of subs in and out for a variety of reasons, and we have to save in other areas in order to offset it. It's not that we're not budgeting properly. We try to budget historically based on what we do for subs. But if you put all the money in subs and then you don't use it, you just have money sitting there when you've got other needs that you're not funding now because you didn't think you had money available. So those are the answers to those two, which I know probably sounds a little confusing. That's kind of how we budget it.
Do we know what we have for school choice this year?
Our net revenue for the year is probably around $650,000. Our cost is around $300,000. We started the year with $1.4 million in the school choice account. The reason we had that much is because that underfunding last year, I never had to offset it because we saved last year on all of our out-of-district transportation, our in-district transportation. We had a lot of expenses because school closed that we didn't have to use money for. So therefore, those things covered the shortfall in the teacher salary line so that we could carry the choice money over, which is one of the reasons we allowed ourselves to reduce the budget this year and bring it down, as opposed to asking for an override last year in the middle of the pandemic.
Okay, I do have another question too on the union contracts. Have we, has the school put money into the budget for union contracts?
Yes.
Yes.
Why are we doing that when we're in negotiation?
Because we don't have a choice. We have to, we can't come back to you in July or August and say, now we have a contract and we need more money. That state doesn't allow us to do that. We have to certify the budget in March, and that's where we're locked into. So if we don't budget for those potential increases, when we submit submit and certify the budget in March, we'll never get it. So we'll have to cut something else to fund it.
Could you give me some information on that, on as far as the law requires? I mean, negotiations and union contracts, I believe don't need to be funded until they're actually negotiated, and that at a special town meeting, because it's a negotiation, that you could come back and get more money for the negotiations then. That's my understanding.
So the challenge we have there, Maureen, is that in a single town system, you're absolutely correct. But in a regional system, we're only allowed to go to the well once. And so, we have to plan for it and we have to have pieces. And if we don't negotiate within those realms, well, then we find ourselves basically having to cut other parts of the budget to compensate for it, because we can't go back to gain additional money. We can go get the law and the components around it. I think it's also built into the way the charter works for the school as well, committee regional.
So on this override, what happens if you don't get this override? You can't go back to the well
You mean in Mendon?
anywhere, in either town?
But what we'd be doing is, like I said, we are allowed to certify the budget and adjust the budget down. We're not allowed to adjust the budget up. So if we don't plan for negotiation and we have to go back and adjust the budget up, that's what we're not allowed to do. But if the town doesn't pass the override, we then as a committee have to decide, we go back normally to both towns and we have more conversations around what can be afforded, what could potentially fit into the budget, what's within the levy, how could that work? How can we make sure that we're not, basically, slashing 45, 50 positions? That's the way we look at it. How do we maintain the progress and the performance and the student performance that we have? And then, we'll go back, we might ask for a lesser amount that might, require an override again or a different override vote. It may be not, because the towns might find another way to fund it. Those are really our options. And then if one town does agree to fund all of what we've asked for and the other town doesn't agree, and we kind of come back, the other option is to have a joint town meeting. We bring both towns together to vote on the budget, and if they vote on and approve the budget, well, then both towns just have to figure it out, how to basically make that happen. It's not the most effective way because unfortunately, at that point in time, you're really wrecking havoc with, probably one town's budget.
Yep.
Thank you. Steve,
Thank
you
you
have
very much, Phil, for that information.
No, absolutely. We'll get you. We'll figure out the law piece, because I know I've been schooled on this by many others that are more experienced than I am.
And I still need some schooling.
We all do.
that's why we're here. That's why we're here.
We might have to add that to the budget, though. I'm not sure if we want to do that tonight.
You don't want to do that ever, Jay.
Let's just circle back to a couple of questions there, kind of that I think are still open-ended. Talk about year to year. I sat through multiple, I think it was actually 4 times the budget process last year, starting in January. So we kind of, last year, I think it was the tail end of January, we pretty much knew that there was an override on the horizon. We get to June, there's basically about a $900,000 increase to the schools. Here we are, we're probably 16 months from the union contract negotiations, and we don't have contracts executed. So I know you said you agreed to a 0.5 COLA, but the COLA is not what's killing us here. There's got to be more to the equation. As I seem to recall a few years ago, I would always see what 2% COLA was. When the budget presentation came, we looked up the screen, and when we talked about budget drivers, we talked about what 2% COLA looked like. And it wasn't, it was a significant number, but it wasn't a daunting number. Now I'm looking every year at daunting increases. And then I'm looking at, an increase of 7 FTEs. We know on the municipal side, and in our town, we've got probably 72 or maybe a few more than that employees. In the regional school district, according to last year's budget presentation, I think between, full-time staff, part-time staff, I think you're 450 or more employees. And you're going to add more employees. Doesn't it stand to reason that as insurance costs are going to rise, benefits are going to rise, these contracts, I just don't see how we're not going to be spawning more overrides after more overrides. I understand MLC, but I don't understand, how this is sustainable. But I guess the first question really is, year to year, there's a $900,000 increase from last year. So I guess that's where I want to start, is where were we in June? We're 900,000 more. So the school budget, irregardless of MLC, school budget went up. On top of that, there was FEMA money, 3 rounds of ESSER money. and both boards of selectmen supported $413,000 in technology money. With all that money that came into the district, again, how is it that we are where we are now? You know, what are those steps and lanes, I guess, ultimately is what I'm looking to find out. You know, you could give zero COLA, but if you're going to give $5,000 in a step and lane, you know, that could equal 5 or 6 or 7%. You know what I mean? So what is that equaling average per employee?
So is your question, you want to know what the steps and lane specific impact is? Or
Yes,
are you wondering the concept of steps and lanes? Yes, you're right. I mean, when we look at the teacher contract, there are two components that are at play. One is the COLA, which I think everyone is kind of familiar with how a COLA works. But then the second is steps and lanes, which is a legally binding structure in the state that we have to fund. You know, and that's based on tenure, it's based on education level, you know, it has a couple of different pieces. It is the actual end amount is a negotiated amount, but it is, you know, it is there. And according to law, my understanding of the law is that we're legally required to pay it. So, but we can tell you what the impact is. Jay, I think you have that number.
Yeah, steps and lanes for next year with a 0% COLA for FY22 would be about $462,000.
now that 462 is steps and lanes, or 462 is what number? 2%?
Or steps and lanes, 0%, steps and lanes only.
No
Steps and
COLA,
lanes.
steps and lanes only.
That's teachers that are moving, have advanced their degree status, have gone another year in the step schedule. The schedules are either 11, 12, or 13 steps, depending on where their degree status is. As you get further up in the degree, we have a higher step, 13 is the top. So that's just steps and lanes, no COLA whatsoever.
Okay, what would 2% COLA look like?
I'll tell you in 1 second. Let me see if I do this right. 2% on top of that would put that increase to $770,000.
So about 475 is your COLA, or 462 was the COLA?
462, so you're probably talking another 300,000, 310, something like that in 2%. And that's just teachers now. Don't forget, this doesn't count any other employees in the district except members of the Teachers Association. So it doesn't count paraprofessionals, admin assistants, custodians, food service, any of those other people are not included in that. That's just teachers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how is it sustainable then to hire more employees when we already have a model that can't keep up? You know, we cannot continue to fund the budget without override after override after override, right? Last year is an override year, right? It was a ballot question for Mendon. We funded it through stabilization, but ultimately it was, you know, again, an override year. So we've got 2 overrides back and forth. You know, FY21 budget, FY22 budget.
Well, the FY21 budget did not come to fruition for an override, Steve. And I guess I remember very clearly the campaign of 2015. And during the campaign of 2015, we basically said, look, it's just the pattern of way things are. And it would be 5 more years until we would come back to both communities and ask for an override again. And that's exactly what came to fruition. In FY20, we had pre-pandemic, literally, you're correct. I think you sat in my budget presentation at least 2 or 3 times before the pandemic broke. God love you. But, you know, the committee was fully intending on going forward. And then with just everything breaking loose with the pandemic and all of the incredible uncertainty, you know, we pulled everything back. And actually on May 5th of last year is when the school committee certified the budget at a smaller amount. And I guess to be very clear, and Brett, you know, I know you were part of the negotiations team last year. we were, again, pre-pandemic, trying to negotiate a successor 3-year contract. And we were having, some success, but realized with all of the uncertainty around COVID and the really dire predictions that we were hearing for education funding, that our state aid was going to be cut by a magnitude of at least 10%. That's why we pared everything down, and anything that we were asking for, almost the same exact positions, and keep in mind 3 of those 7 positions are restoration of positions that were cut to make the budget work in 2019. Those were all dialed back, and we negotiated a 1-year successor contract, and realized in the interim as well, and I think I heard, Maureen, you ask a question about this at a previous meeting. We've been in negotiations with our Teachers Association for other issues related to working conditions through the COVID. As obviously, if you have children, Brett, that, we've had hybrid models, we've had remote models, and so on. So it really is no word of a lie that we've had so many other things to negotiate in addition to successor contracts, but also memorandums of agreement over working conditions.
Yeah, and I would just, reinforce that, right? I do recall it was very explicit last year that we were, because I was part of those initial negotiations, that it was clear that it was in everyone's best interest to defer those negotiations. So, or to do that temporary agreement. And so that was done, and that was very clear. And I also recall very clearly, even 3 years ago, Joe, when I first was exploring becoming a selectman, the notion and the conversation around, hey, this is really a cyclical model where every 5 years or so we're going to be coming back and having to do an override. It's just the nature of how funding of schools work in communities like the town of Upton. And that may be something that's worth talking about a little bit, because I think that there's a misperception or a misconception, maybe I'm wrong, and Steve, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that there's the sense like, oh, are we going to have an override request every single year? And I don't think anyone's ever thought that. I don't think that's ever been part of your strategic plan. I don't know how you think about that. I know in 2015, it was, hey, we'll probably have to come back in 5 years, and here we are, and that's coming to fruition, which was forecasted. What's your sense over the next, what do the next 5 years look like in terms of school budgeting?
I think it's going to have to be almost, again, looking at the same pattern of how we made ends meet through 2016 through 2020. Sometimes it is easier than others. I mean, you guys know, do you ever really have an easy budget in these 2 communities? But I think you've got to be really smart and strategic. We, regarding the question around school choice, our school choice is down dramatically this year from where it traditionally is. It's down upwards of $300,000. But keep in mind, part of that is deliberate in the sense that we intentionally didn't take any kids this year at the start of this year because of COVID, and everything was very status quo. So I think we're going to have to be smart and strategic. I think we're going to have to be smart and strategic, just like the towns are with ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds that we'll get. The good news, at least with ESSER 3, is we'll have until 2024 to expend them. So it's as you guys know, it's a lot of pieces of the puzzle, and finding efficiencies where you can to keep, to sustain the bump that you get from an override.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, that's helpful. Steve, Maureen, other questions? Or Steve, go ahead, please. I see you off mute.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. So currently you had mentioned the school choice in students. What is that number looking like right now? What do we have for out-of-district students choicing in?
It's about 142 kids choicing in, and then we've got about 40 to 50, but let's call it like 45 choicing out.
But you weren't accepting any choice students this year, correct? Are these
Yeah,
the
any-
existing?
Exactly, Maureen. We didn't take any new ones. And usually there's a couple places where we get an onslaught of requests for it, and they're natural points: kindergarten, freshman year at Nipmuc, and then 5th grade at Miska.
Typically, we have about 160 to 165 choice in students on any given year. So we're down about 20.
Thank you.
And talking of cyclical models, you're basically, or as Brett, as you had mentioned it, then I'm to assume then, if I were to look at Blackstone, Millville, or Dover, Sherburne, or any other regional school district, I would expect to see overrides every 5 years. Am I hearing that correctly?
It depends on the regional school district, Steve. Some of them, yes, others no. I would say Blackstone, Millville, nowhere near, probably not to the degree that they have had overrides in my 10 years of being superintendent, but they do not have the level of services that we do in Mendon Upton.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, Maureen, Steve? No, we can.
So just thank you to the school department, Dr. Marusik and Phil and Jay for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank
Just,
you for having me.
A quick one, the ESSER 3 funding, the 483,000 that is available from ESSER 3, the district plans on accepting that money, I take it?
Yes.
Yes.
There was
We will
something,
not say no to it.
yeah, there was something in print, I believe, that led people to think the contrary, so.
I think the
Yeah,
confusion-
I think, Steve, that was unfortunate, and it really was kind of a misrepresentation. I think we're in the same position that the towns are. We do not have clear guidance on specific streams in which it could be expended. Other than that, we need to use at least 20% of it, according to the feds, for learning loss.
Yeah, I think similar to
On it
you,
today, and I thought I saw that it needs to be expended by September of 23, I thought I saw. So I thought that gave a lot of flexibility to the use of the money. So that was one of the questions that I had coming into this meeting.
Yeah, I believe, Steve, it's ESSER 2 is of 23, and the ESSER 3, which is the American Recovery Act, is 24.
Great. Well, again, thank you, Phil, for initiating this conversation, and Joe and Jay for you guys joining and answering questions. It obviously helps us, and it's always a good learning experience to go through these exercises as a group. We'll be doing this next year and the year after that, and so on and so forth. So it's good to go through these exercises and make sure that we are staying in sync with the processes and understanding the transparency and how each side operates here. So this is great. Thank you very much.
no, absolutely. And I'll say it again, we're always willing to come and answer questions or take questions that you have, whether it's in the meeting or one-on-one, feel free.
Great. Okay. Thank
Just
you.
one last little parting thought. Is there a sense that the contracts will be executed before we go to town meeting? I mean, where are we in that process? It just would just seem that it's been an awful long process, even given that you had the 1-year delay.
I will tell you, based on my experience in negotiating these contracts and being on the negotiation committee, I don't think they'll be locked in by town meeting.
Okay.
So far, Steve, with the current negotiations for next year's contract, we've only had 4 meetings with the association. So we've got probably a lot of work ahead of us still.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Anything else, Steve?
No, that's it.
Okay. Thanks, Maureen.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Take care. Next up, we have the Memorial Day discussion around we have someone here from, I think I saw somebody from the VFW on. And the discussion is to talk about how we want to handle Memorial Day. Last year, we did a customized version of Memorial Day where we, didn't have the parade. We went to the cemetery, the 3 cemeteries, as we typically do. There was a virtual ceremony that was recorded and viewable online. But I think, why don't you want to walk us through that a little bit, please?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm here to invite you to Memorial Day services. And the Veterans Council met last night and we decided not to have a parade. We're going to have abbreviated services at the 3 cemeteries that we visit. At Lakeview Cemetery at 8 a.m. in the morning. This is on May 31st, 2021. And then we'll go to Maplewood Cemetery and visit the graves up there of our fallen soldiers at about 8:15, 8:30. And then around 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock, we're going to be there. It's the first burying ground. Visit the first soldiers that defended our country and brought us our freedom that we had. We wrestled away from the British. And then about 10:30, we're going to have services on the common as usual, but there will not be a parade. And I encourage the Board of Selectmen to attend and as usual, bring the greetings of the town and a small message. And everything is pretty much set. The schedule is pretty much set. We just have to fill in the names and get the participants.
Great.
And that's
Okay.
all.
Well, it's, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Any questions?
No, I would just say, it's as we all know, we're all in this together, and it's really unfortunate as it's a special day to recognize people that have given their lives for the country and for the defense of our freedom. So we'll absolutely, certainly I'm committed to participating in the ceremonies as I've done every year. I'm sure others, if they're able to join, will join. But thank you for all you do to coordinate, organize, and support all these activities for us. It's really, really critical. Maureen, Steve, any comments or questions?
I would just like to participate also.
Thank you. Welcome to have you.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Russell. And what was the starting date? I'm sorry, the commencement was 7 a.m. and that was at Lakeview Cemetery?
8 a.m. 8 a.m. at the North Gate, Lakeview Cemetery.
Okay.
I can now put the schedule on the town website as soon as I get it.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you, Russ. Take care.
Yep, thank you.
Next up, we have an amendment to the Rushford and Sons liquor license, and there is a request on here to expand the hours of serving liquor or beer on the patio to coincide with their approved hours of operation, which is a bit of an expansion from what had initially been approved by the board. So I think, Brian, are you here? Yes, Mr. Goodman. Why don't you go ahead and walk us through this a bit, please?
Absolutely. Well, we are looking to amend the expanded license premise to match the hours during which alcoholic beverages may be sold.
Excellent. Okay, great. Steve or Maureen, questions for Mr. Goodman?
And from me, glad you got out on the patio.
Yeah, you know what? The last couple weekends were awesome. People seem to
I'll
really
bet.
respect the rules and have a lot of fun. And thankfully, knock on wood, no trouble, and things went about as smooth as one could possibly hope in the year of our Lord 2021. So
Great.
Glad to
we're now,
hear it.
Steve,
especially too, now that I'm starting to establish a relationship with some of the food trucks and with as of earlier this afternoon, the pending lifting of some of the food restrictions. We still have to follow a lot of the COVID guidelines, but we're not going to be required for food. It'll be pretty nice to, after work on a Thursday, be able to go and have a beer on the way home.
yeah. Go ahead, Steve. Any questions?
Yeah, I think the only comment I would make is that I ran into this my first year on the board, and I just want to make sure Mr. Goodman's aware of this, that your posted hours, if you're going to be serving outdoors and you want to expand to all these hours, you actually have to be there all those hours. So that's the way the liquor license was always explained, in the past. So are you sure that you want, if, even if it's inclement weather, you still have to be open during those hours for outdoor service. So are you sure that you want all your hours to be outdoor service?
No, I wasn't aware of that. I really wanted the flexibility to be able to open when it was advantageous for everybody to open. But really, more
Yeah.
flexibility is really what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Do we know, Derek or Sandy, how that works? And I'm not questioning Steve. I know you said you experienced it before, but I want to be very, very clear with the applicant about what the expectations are. I think, obviously what we would like to have Mr. Goodman able to do is be able to selectively offer service outside, anytime within his windows of or hours of operation, but not be required to do that, to your point, Steve, right? If it's raining or snowing or inclement, or they want to take a night off or what have you, I would hope they'd have the flexibility to do that as business owners, but I don't know, Derek, do you know about this?
I mean, we certainly have to check with the ABCC on the actual ruling. I do know in many situations, especially breweries, they do rely on nice weather in order to operate, and many of them do not operate or offer the sale of alcohol during times where the weather doesn't work out for them. But it's something I don't, that's just my opinion, my experience. We would certainly have to check with ABCC for a final ruling.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said,
Yeah.
I think that was the only, last time when this came up, I thought the weekend hours, that's pretty easy, that's pretty straightforward. But I do know that, or again, at least my previous, unless the law has changed on this, my previous experience has been that the hours that you post are the hours that you have to serve. So we just want to make sure that, we do that in accordance with the ABCC.
Yeah. Sandy?
Yeah, of course.
The license states to be open during that period of time. A lot of, for instance, a golf course would not be serving alcohol because it would be unsafe during a thunderstorm, but they still have a license, just to give us some type of an example, in the same way that the brewery could not operate outside during a thunderstorm because it would not be safe for the patrons. So I'm just kind of using that as an example, a little bit of common sense, so that when it is good, he would be open, and if he wasn't, if the weather was.
Yeah, and I think we would obviously, support that. I know that, right, if I think about the Rose Garden and serving alcohol, they've got an outdoor patio area, and I think that, that's used or not used depending upon what the weather is. But let's certainly have that as a takeaway to just clarify and make sure that we can get Mr. Goodman the information. And if we need to make any amendments after this approval, if we have support for this by the board, and we find out that this is in fact a constraint or a requirement that's required by the ABCC, then You know, I certainly myself would be open to coming back, you know, to Mr. Goodman coming back and saying, hey, you know what, we didn't realize we were going to have to do this. That was the takeaway. We found out we would. So here's my new proposal. And then we just adjust it accordingly. But I'd rather at this point, personally, just, you know, sort of open it up, give them the flexibility, assuming that that's the way the law is. And then if they need to reel it back, then let the business owners figure that out.
So we are expanding the indoor license to accommodate the outdoor hours.
Well, the outdoor license to accommodate the indoor hours.
Well, the outdoor, yeah.
We're
But you
basically
have-
matching up. So the hours, so Sandy, what should the motion be? I think that's the question. We want to make sure we get the motion correct.
Right.
To amend the expanded license premise to match the hours during which alcohol beverages may be sold.
I still don't get it.
All right, one more time, Sandy.
Sorry, amend the expanded licensed premise to match the hours during which alcoholic beverages may be sold.
So we're gonna keep the same hours, just expanded outdoors.
Correct.
Okay. To expand, okay.
I was gonna say, I mean, I think we can right? make that motion, Maureen. So,
Wait a minute. Expand,
Amend the expanded license premise
amend, expanded license premise.
to match the hours.
Okay,
During which alcoholic beverages
maybe served.
may be sold.
Okay. I will move to amend the expanded license premise to match the hours for which the alcohol may be sold. Is that enough?
Yes.
Okay. Second. I, Maureen Dornell.
The dog agrees.
Hey, hops are bad for dogs. No beer for dogs.
Motion, Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Thank you very much. Next up, we have,
Thank you, everyone.
you're welcome. Good luck. Thank you. A resignation from the building committee for the community center by a J. Rodriguez. So I think we need a motion to accept that resignation.
I would make a motion that we accept the resignation of Jay Rodriguez from the Community Buildings Committee, Community Center Building Committee. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. We were going to consider appointments, but I don't think we've posted this yet. If I'm not, so I mean, I think that we need to post this for whatever it is, the 30 days, like we do with all committee appointments. So I would not necessarily consider appointing a new member at this point. I don't know, Maureen, Steve, what you guys think, but.
No, I wouldn't either. Town meeting's only what, 10 days away?
Yeah. Okay.
Then I think it would be better that we wait until then.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, we want to give people the opportunity to apply, right? Because
Right.
We know who applied the first time. We have somebody that's there, but if we get 5 new applicants, then we may be able to solicit additional help for other things like we always do. So, Steve, you good with that?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the resignation just came in last Thursday, so there certainly has not been a a reasonable period of time, so.
No, and we usually send out that email, sort of like a job opening or whatever. So, okay, let's do that. Next, we have the motion to award the Selectmen scholarships, the Board of Selectmen scholarships. Derek, what do we need to do for this? I didn't see any attachment here.
Me either.
If you don't, if you'd like, I did read the policy. The policy grants us the ability to give out 6 scholarships of $500 apiece and 2 separate scholarships of $200 apiece. One on the Gary Bates scholarship and one of the Ramsey scholarship.
Mm-hmm. But what is this? We're not awarding it to a particular person, right? We haven't even looked at the people. So what is this for?
Oh, you must not have gotten your attachment. There actually, the applicants are already in, and we have 10 applicants for scholarships. Did you not get your information on this?
Nope.
I didn't either.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sure I got it, but I obviously haven't reviewed it or looked at it. So apologies for that. Or
No, Brett, you may not have received it. As you know, we've been going through since last Wednesday email migration. And we do know there have been multiple occasions where folks may have missed an email or did not receive one in its entirety. So that may have happened. So I think we need to push this off for a follow-up meeting. So as Steve pointed out, you will see 10 applications in front of you, and the board, the 3 of you will go ahead and rank them appropriately and award the scholarships like you have done in previous years.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
Sounds good.
Are we under any type of time constraint for that, or is that going to be, are we going to be able to do that at a meeting after town meeting?
Yeah, I think we certainly can wait till our next meeting after town meeting will be May 18th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I should have noticed that was here and wondered what it was previously, but I didn't. So.
Geez, Brett, I can't believe he let you off the hook that easy. Derek, you really should have leaned into him on that.
Yeah, you should have, Derek.
Okay. But don't worry, Steve. We can count on you. I deserve it. You know what? I should probably look at my email right now just to.
I looked at I didn't see it.
I forwarded my copy to you, so I know you have it.
Just so I can fess up. Yeah. Well, that's
how you can
live
like
by my email filter, so I know why I didn't get that. Next up, we have a common vic license here. So that is going to be for Kelly Farm. That one should be pretty straightforward.
There is actually no attachment on that, so I did not see the applicant on that.
For one day or for the summer or?
For the season.
That's their renewal license,
Okay.
seasonal renewal, common vic. It has been approved by the Board of Health and also by code enforcement.
Okay.
Sandy, do you know, are there, in the motion, do we have to mention hours of operation or anything like that? And is there an ending date on this, or would this license
No.
end December 31st?
December 31st.
Okay.
Okay.
If everybody is good, shall I make a motion?
Yep.
Please do.
Okay. I would make a motion to approve a common vic license for Kelly's Farm. Stephen Mattelli, aye.
Second, Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action.
Do we normally get that one that late, this late in the year? This doesn't get done in back in December?
Well, he's not open in the wintertime. Spring's here.
Yeah.
It's more seasonal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next up, we have the 5K application for the Milford Chamber of Commerce. Unless there are questions, I will take a motion on that.
Now,
gonna
that's
be-
all been approved by the police chief and,
I talked to both the fire chief, police chief, and DPW today, and none of them have any issues with this application.
Yeah, it's July 31st, 7 a.m., right?
yep. I'll
Yep.
make a motion that we approve the Milford Area Chamber of Commerce request for a 5K race on Saturday, July 31st, from 7 to 7:30. Race begins at 8 a.m. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Mattelli and I.
Oh, shit.
Brett Simus, aye, unanimous action.
I want to mute that, Maureen.
Oh, sorry.
She's frozen.
Oh, God, my computer.
You're back. We got you now. I mean, your hand. There she is. Look at that. All right. So next up, we have the Upton Men's Club request for funding from the Beautification Trust. Mr. Howell.
Hey, good morning. I mean, good afternoon. Good evening. It's been a long meeting for you guys. Holy smoke. I didn't think we were gonna get out of the school system. I started right at 7 with you guys. Yeah, so we put in a request for funds not to exceed $2,500 from the beautification fund. In regards to, we're taking over this year. We've done the annual stuff down on 140 in West Hartford and on the end of Prospect and the Welcome to Upton signs. One of the members, Greg Carlisle, has taken on the pots at the Mendon Road and in front of Town Hall when they get replaced, and some various other locations. I'm not exactly sure where they all are. So we're thinking we just bundle all of this cost into one request so that we don't have to keep coming back to you guys in regards to that. So I thought, I was pretty open with a $2,500 not to exceed request, only for the reason I know that we usually spend about $1,100, $1,200 on the plantings down by Dunkin' Donuts on Prospect Street and then the Welcome Nothing signs. So with the pots coming into play, and it's kind of our first year taking that over, we thought it'd be responsible enough that you guys would grant us the ability to go up to $2,500. I don't expect to go that far. I think we can get away, roughly with $1,800, $1,900, but I don't want to have to keep coming back to you guys. Obviously, you guys' time is important. So that's the request in a nutshell. Are there any specific questions?
Interesting question.
Nope.
Siri, that is an interesting question. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going to say, no questions. I saw you gentlemen working a couple of weeks back on a Saturday out by the corner of 140 and Hartford Ave. Great job over there. And yes, I know even at the end of Grove Street, there's a bunch of different locations in town that have the pots for planting. So, yeah, good work. I'm in support. Sounds good to me.
I'm also in support.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great just for people that don't necessarily realize all of the mulch and plantings that go on in front of Dunkin' Donuts on the corner by the gas station, and that work has been done by the Men's Club for years. All of the Welcome to Upton signs, all of those perennial plantings, all of the annual plantings that get put in, the mulching is all done by the Upton Men's Club volunteers. And those pots, correct me if I'm wrong, Alan or Mike, those had been done by was it the Bloomer Girls that used to maintain those, or the Upton Women's Club?
I'm not exactly sure what group it was, Mr. Simus, but it was one of those two that kind of passed the baton.
Yeah.
Okay, the Upton Women's Club. So they've supported those for years and years and maintained them, which is a great thing. And I know, if not for the past 2 years, at least for last year, I know Greg Carlisle had led the work for the Men's Club to coordinate all the watering and maintenance of those. I saw, Mike Campbell around, the owner of the Rose Garden, down watering those plants to keep them healthy and happy. So a lot of work and a lot of hours by a lot of people to keep the town looking nice, and it's very much appreciated and recognized. So thanks to you guys individually and to the entire men's club, and obviously this is something that we all support. Go ahead, Mike.
So there was one other thought that we had, rather than the transfer of money from men's club to vendor to town hall back to the men's club, do you see an issue with us having invoices being submitted directly to the town of Upton via the plantings, AKA the mulch? Let's say that the gentleman comes forward with a mulch invoice.
Yeah.
Can we have it written out directly to the town of Upton, or is that something that you?
I don't know, Sandy, how does that work? Do you know? Or Derek, sorry.
Yeah, we prefer that. Like, what we would just need to know is each one of these different vendors would have to fill out a W-9 in advance, so that we can enter them as to make them vendors in our system, and then we can just cut them a check directly.
That's perfect. We plan, and all intentions, always plan on using local vendors. So we don't plan on straying much past a 15-mile radius of this town. And with really our intention is to use in-town vendors. So we will go forward with that. Obviously, if products can't be procured from local vendors, then we'll step outside that window. But that's great news, and that'll make it a little easier for our participating members to get the invoices directly to you guys. That'd be great.
Yeah.
And we'll try to coordinate with the vendors the best we can as our overall project plan, so we're not submitting invoices every other week. So
yeah, there was actually a thought that within the club that would have one supplier of the pot plants. No, that wasn't a good way to say that. The plants for the pots. To give us the rotation, spring, summer, fall, and then we'll try and have them invoice at the end of the summer, picking up the fall plants, and then give you an invoice for the whole year, rather than keep hitting you guys with small invoices.
Yeah, that's fine. Again, as long as when they hand you the invoice, if they could hand you a filled out W-9, that'll make it easy on us, so we don't have to chase them down for W-9.
Got it.
That's perfect. Okay, so we need a W-9, Alan. That's easy.
Yeah, we'll work that, and we'll make sure that there's they're not charging the state tax as well, because we know that's
right. So the other thing I wanted to touch base on is there's been some heavy questions in regards to the plantings on 140 in Hartford there in regards to the anticipated construction of widening the road. There are quite a few plants there. I mean, they're not like they're really special plants, but they have been there, and relocation has been one of the subjects. So what I don't see, and I haven't really pursued it heavily in the town website, I'll be honest, I've spent no time on that. Is there a design for plantings to go in after this widening of the road and everything is done? Is there some anticipation of what the corner and the intersection will look like, and will it be beautified, or is there going to be?
Yeah, I don't know, Derek, do you have a sense of that? I know we can ask Dennis on.
Dennis and I briefly talked about this, and as you know, they're going to do the roadway expansion over at the intersection over there. Dennis was going to look at to see how the current mulch beds would be affected, if affected at all. But let's just say they're not affected. There's no maintenance plan involved in that.
Right.
Once they complete construction. But he looked at it. He doesn't think that those mulch beds are going to be affected at all.
all right.
Okay, great.
Yeah, because we didn't know if we needed to move the plants and then we're going to stage them somewhere else and just try to reuse them, right? So.
All right.
And
So that's
something
great.
so that aspect, that construction won't take place until next summer, so summer of 22. So we should stay in contact, and if we get new information and if we have to move those plantings, let's just try to communicate and have those conversations in advance.
All right. And the same goes for the Upton, welcome to Upton sign on Hopkinton Road. It was brought to my attention that there was some stakes and paint. I know Bill McCormick, who's in the club, reached out to the DPW director. I haven't heard word of that as well, but I would hope that we'd be informed if we needed to move it or change its location or retrofit it.
Dennis and I had that conversation as well, and he told me that sign will not be affected. That stake is a starting point so that they can mark out the road. It's
Great.
just kind of it's just kind of a baseline measure so that they can get their distances. But he said that sign will not be affected at all.
Excellent.
Okay, well, I'd like to close it with, for the men's club, Derek, if there's anything outside the world of town government that you guys need a little help with, please reach out to us.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you both.
All right, I'll take a motion, Steve or Maureen.
And which fund is this coming out of?
The beautification, do you want me to motion it, Maureen?
Yeah, would you please?
It's Racine D, Delta.
D, okay.
D is in Delta.
D is in Delta. Okay. I
D.
would make a motion that we expend out of the Racine D fund up to $2,500, but not to exceed $2,500 for the purposes of beautification for the men's club. And again, as to be expended through the vendors. Stephen Mattellion, aye.
Second, Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Thank you, Alan and Mike. We'll talk to you guys later.
Have
Thank
a good
you.
evening.
Bye, guys.
All
Thank
right,
you very
be
much.
safe all.
Next up, we have the discussion of mosquito flyer funding from the Sustainable Upton Group. I see Lori and Marcella here.
Hi.
Hi.
So this is in effect the same flyer that was approved last year. There's minor update changes, but nothing to speak of, nothing that we think would require additional approval. What we like to get from you all is approval for the funding of this. The quote we got for the printing itself, it looks like it's the same as last year, and it'll be $375 plus another $25 to make it $400 to print up a couple hundred extra copies that we can hand out in addition to what's going to be inserted in the town crier. Last year, the town crier was very generous and funded the cost of the insertion of the flyer, but this year, because of COVID, they've had, like everybody has had trouble financially with, all the craziness. So they're unable to offer us that, but that's $185. So we're talking a total of $585 to have the flyer printed and inserted into the town crier. So we're hoping that we'll find approval for that, and if we could possibly have it billed to the town, much like the beautification fund folks were, I think we could probably make that simple and have it processed through the town. And if you have any questions for us regarding the content of the flyer, I did send an email with a PDF attached, but because of all the crazy stuff going on with the emails at Town Hall, I'm not sure you got a chance to take another look at it. But if you, the three of you approved it last year, and I think that it's not. The differences on there are very minor. So
Okay. Great, thank you. So I do want to make sure that we're in sync with the Board of Health on this. We clearly support this. We did it last year. We don't have any issue with that. If it's something that we're going to do each year, we should probably figure out how to fund it, because I think we funded it out of just like the Selectmen's fund last year. Is that right, Derek?
Yeah, the William Knowlton Trust.
Okay. How much is remaining in that trust account?
According to my records, approximately $70,000.
Okay. Okay. So certainly I would support following the same model. I don't know, Maureen, Steve, what questions you have for either Marcella or Lori or Derek around the process and funding.
No, I would support that.
Yes, I do remember this from last year. That was going to be my only comment, as I always like to see it in front of me, just, that way residents ask me questions about it and I want to make sure I'm well versed. So it's hard for me to do that when I don't, see it or have it in hand. But I agree with you. I know there was some problems with email, the server in town hall. So, I understand that. But if you could forward back and circle back and get that email off to us, that would be great. I'd like to just see,
Oh, sure.
say it's exactly as last year?
There are a couple of minor tweaks. Lori, I don't know specifically what, if you want to describe, what the differences are.
There are really no changes. There had been something that you had asked us last year to put on the bottom that we had to add on, and now it was added on when it was originally made this year. So that was that change. Another change that you had asked for that wasn't on the amended one, that got incorporated too. And the only other change that they made on the graphic side is where they talked about the BT dunks. They just said if needed. They added the if needed. There was really no other changes.
Okay.
So if we support this, maybe we do it, Steve, contingent on sort of reviewing or approval of the updated version, which I know will be straightforward, but it sounds like that will make you the most comfortable. So let's certainly do that. I don't know why we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, if we can get that to you, I don't know how the email is working now. If I email it to you this evening, we'd like to get this going tomorrow, because if we can have it printed up tomorrow, it could be in the next town crier, inserted into the next town crier, but we're working with the deadline. So if you see something and want to jump in with a comment, the sooner the better. So if
Steve, I would defer to you on that. I'm comfortable.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm comfortable with it. I don't want to micromanage. I'm sure you two ladies have done a fine job. And if we made corrections to it last year, I'm confident that you're being truthful and what you're telling me is accurate. So I'm fine. We can motion it with no, with no hiccups, no delays.
If you see something there that screams at you, we can always put a stop to the process before. But that's a little easier to do than to wait and wait for any other comments on it. But it really is substantially exactly what you saw last year and approved last year. And I think it got a very good response from the town. We were happy to have it distributed. And I personally had it on my refrigerator door all season long. In fact, it was still on my refrigerator door, buried under a few other things maybe. But it's the sort of thing that's nice to have up and available for people to make some references to.
Thank you. Derek, what is the fund so that we can have the motion? Please.
Sorry, I couldn't get to my mic. It's the William Knowlton Trust.
Okay.
And I would like to say that we are going to the Board of Health Thursday night, but they are aware of the changes or the lack of changes, and it's sort of a formality.
Yeah, and I know they supported it last year as well. So this
Absolutely,
is
yep.
Yeah.
We'll take a motion.
Maureen, do you have this one?
Well, is there an amount?
Yes, it's $585 total.
I would make a motion then that from the William Knowlton Trust Fund that we fund the sustainable request for the Upton Group on the mosquito flyer for $500.
585.
585, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Maureen Dwinell, aye.
I second the motion. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Thank you very much. Marcella, Lori, appreciate the time and effort on this and your volunteering for the community. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much for supporting it. Thank you.
Of course.
Have a great night.
You too, thanks.
Yes, you as well.
And next up, we have the town manager report and updates. Derek.
I think I'll start with the one that's going to confuse us all this evening. So last Tuesday, from what we understand from our technology vendor, they were doing their monthly reset of the town hall server. When they did the reset, it ultimately crashed our email server. And so we were without email for the better part of, what is that? For the better part of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and most of Saturday. So what ended up happening, so this is working on the email server exchange. How we're able to get emails today is we actually migrated over to Outlook 365, which is a cloud-based email system. It was something that we were planning on anyways. Kelly had been working with Retrofit, our technology vendor, on this migration. We didn't expect it to happen this soon. We were expecting it to happen more in the early parts of May. But again, because our Exchange server crashed, we had a fast track migrating over to 365. So right now, all of our emails, and from this day forward, all of our emails are now cloud-based and will be managed through the cloud. As far as the Exchange system, the Retrofit tells us that they're going to spend the better part of the next week or so trying to retrieve the emails that may have been lost during that time. So many folks who may have emailed us during that day should have received some type of notice, automatic notice that stated that the email did not arrive, to warn those folks to try again. And that's what we were told, and that's what some of us experienced. But we also found out today that there were many people who didn't get any notification at all. So it's an unfortunate situation because we're talking about 70 plus employees for multiple days. So we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of requests or notifications that may have come through. So we'll continue to try to work through that problem. But again, the glass being half full, we now are in the cloud, and that's where we intended to be anyways. That product actually is being funded through the CARES Act, given that it's a cloud-based system and that's an allowable use of the funds. So if there are any questions on that, I'll continue to move forward. Early voting will start this Saturday for our May 11th election.
Derek?
Yes.
I don't want to get too technical, right? This isn't a technical conversation, but maybe you and I can touch base offline. I really want to understand what happened.
Sure. And we're still trying to understand ourselves, so I'm happy to have the conversation.
Okay.
So as far as early voting starts this coming Saturday, as you know, our annual town election is May 11th. So Saturday, the hours for early voting will be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Town Hall. All of next week will be our typically posted Town Hall operating hours. So that's 8 to 4, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We'll go till 6 o'clock on Tuesday, and then on Friday it will end at noontime because those are the Town Hall operating hours. That information will be sent out to all of our residents via Reverse 911 this coming Thursday. It's already been posted on our website. Unfortunately, we continue to stay in the red. We did see a decrease in the number of active cases this past week, but we don't, working with the Board of Health this past couple of days, they don't believe that it's going to warrant allowing us to move back into the yellow, given that we still have a high number of active cases. So again, the Board of Health and Fire, they continue to operate the regional vaccination center in Uxbridge and at Nipmuc on Saturdays as we try to vaccinate as many folks as possible. The lights you may have noticed have been activated and now are operational at the corner of Westboro and High Street. right over at the pond. So those lights you'll see will be flashing probably for the next 3 weeks, according to Chief Bradley. Those, the reason why they're going to be flashing is because that's a new set of lights over at that intersection. And so they're going to be set in the flashing mode to just try to warn drivers that there is a new set of lights there and that they have to start paying attention to it. So we would expect them, again, within 3 weeks, they'll be fully functional and will be forcing folks to stop at that intersection. And then last, I just wanted to report some really good news. Today, Rep. Moradian and I communicated that he was able to secure a $25,000 public safety earmark for the FY22 budget. So that was approved on the House side through committee, and then will have to be approved on the Senate side through committee, and then ultimately will be submitted as part of the governor's budget. So this past year, we received a $20,000 earmark. In previous years, it's been up to almost $50,000. So we're happy to have another additional $25,000 that we can put towards public safety use. Pending any questions, that's all I have for this evening.
Nope. Great stuff. Good.
Good stuff, Derek.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all good.
All right. Wonderful. Any other issues, items, topics that people want to, or Maureen or Steve, that you want to raise, or Derek, that we may not have anticipated?
Not at this time.
All right.
Just kind of a basic comment, I guess I would make, which is, I think moving forward as we, look forward to the meeting, and then it seems like we get a few months off and we're right back to, talking about the budget. We'll be talking about next year's budget come November, most likely. It just seems that we've got to really put our heads together and get an idea. The way we're building our budget, it just seems like we're backwards, because we're making investments on the municipal side when, the school is planning big increases, and we could be making more adjustments on the municipal side and not having constant stress. This shouldn't be this stressful, come the end of April, looking towards the beginning of May, and, we make this many adjustments. So in my mind, I feel like we're doing something wrong, at some level. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's part of why we had all these conversations, right? I mean, clearly there's an opportunity to work together with the school committee and the municipal side to create strategic alignment around priorities, right? Like, we're doing a lot of this moving around of parts because we're trying to get a community center funded. We're trying to, defer the override for a year because we're getting this ARP money coming in. I mean, and even if not for that, regardless, even if it were just the community center versus funding schools, and there wasn't the sort of COVID issue in there, like, you still want to be rationalizing your investments, right? Because we know at some point we're going to need to reinvest in a DPW, and whether that's in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, I don't know, but we need to be planning for that eventuality. It's just part of the way you need to maintain any municipal or any municipality. So having, we shouldn't be caught off guard. The school shouldn't be caught off guard. We shouldn't be caught off guard. In a January, February timeline for something that needs to happen in May. Like, we've got to have alignment and clarity around these things 1, 2, 3 years out, because we know the kinds of major investments we're going to have to be making. So anyway, long answer to just, I totally agree with you, Steve, and I think that's we have to sort of double down and commit to doing a better job of communicating with each other, both within the board and across with our other boards and committees in the town.
I agree also with Steve. That's something we have to actually make the school, and it's hard to do, to make them part of the budget process.
Right.
The whole budget process, what the town has, what the school has.
Right. And that's the key, right? It's like we're trying to manage an entire community and services for an entire town. Their focus is on the school. That's great, but right, as a board,
it still affects the town.
it still affects the town and other services and other investments. And at the end of the day, it's one wallet that people have that they're pulling money out of to support these things. So,
Right.
You know, and ultimately, you know, we're seeing it now in the projects that are coming forward to the town. You know, I had a conversation this afternoon with a relatively new resident in town, a younger family. And as our population has increased and as there's more and more households coming online, we're losing student population. So no matter how you slice it, you know, my read on that is we're not inviting in young families. And I think it's the tax bill. I think that tax bill is sky high, and I don't think we're affordable for younger families. You know, if we were, we wouldn't be seeing, you know, every project coming at us as over 55 projects. So, you know, it's one thing to be mindful of it, but, you know, we've got to start acting on it.
Yeah.
very good. I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn this meeting. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second, Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a good week.
You also. Good night, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.